Hello folks. Gara Prime just came out, right? And I figured it could be time to give people sort of an updated guide on just sort of like how to play Gara. Because Gara is probably one of the most underrated Warframes in the game. Because there are two Garas. That's probably what people don't know. Because what she actually can do isn't immediately apparent when you get her and look at her kit. When you look at her and just what she can do and stuff, you sort of like your first impression, you get the idea that she is kind of a defensive Warframe with her glass wall and, you know, this whole thing that she can spread out that enemies can't get through. So you get this idea that she's meant for like defense missions and stuff like that. And you can shatter it and then just kill everything like a big nuke and stuff. And all of that's true. But she's got some hidden stuff that's gonna take a while to explain, so bear with me here, people. That actually makes her one of the best damage dealers and like DPS frames in the entire game. She can shred anything, like actually like bizarrely good. But it takes a lot of build around to get that to work, which is why there are in fact two Garas. There is the beginner version of Gara, which is like just how most people play her. And it's very straightforward. And then there's Secret Gara. Secret Gara, the monster nuker, the powerhouse that requires you to have a bunch of endgame stuff to make it work. So I'm gonna show you both of these, basically. So let's just go over her kit. We'll start with the beginner version, right? We'll start with the stuff that's kind of apparent. And then we'll move on to the stuff that isn't so apparent. First of all, passive. When she stands in the light, she can blind enemies around her and open them up to finish her. This is pretty good. It's just good. Don't have to think about it all that much. Enemies around you are just gonna get like sort of stunned and blinded pretty often. Her number one ability, the Shattered Lash. This is what we call a pseudo-exalted weapon, and I will get to this. I will get to what this actually means in practice. Don't worry about it. For now, it is a single target damaging skill if you tap it, or you slash it in a wide arc if you hold it. So I'll show you. Let's just pop up some standard enemies. Let's just take, I don't know, let's take like a level 50 Lancer, right? Boom. He's over there. So the number one ability, if you aim it and tap it, it sends out a little lash, kills enemies. Neat. Now this is the beginner stuff. I'm starting it simple here, people. It's gonna get really goddamn complicated, but it's gonna be cool. It's all gonna come together. Just bear with me. Now if you have 10 of these guys instead, and we hold the button instead of tapping it, slashes in a wide arc. Slashes in a wide arc and kills them. Now, her number two ability, Splinter Storm. It looks like this. You get a bunch of glass shards in the air floating around you. Splinter Storm does damage per second to anything that gets close to you. Gets caught up in this glass shards flying around in the air. In the bottom right corner, it says 387 damage. That is the continuous damage that enemies take from standing close to you while this is active. You get close to them, you can see that they're taking a bit of damage. And then it runs out, and you gotta recast it. So, you know, over time, they take damage. It also provides us with damage reduction. We take less damage while this ability is active. You can cast it on enemies instead of casting it on yourself. You can cast it, and they, you know, yeah, they take a bit of damage over there because one of their friends is just putting glass shards on everyone else. They don't like it. The damage reduction from this is quite potent, with just like 140% ability strength, you get 90% damage reduction. Is that good? Yes, that's very good. It negates most of the damage that you take. You can hit friendlies with this to give them damage reduction. You can target this on a defense target to give it 50% damage reduction. That's great. Her number 3 ability. Now I have replaced this in the helmet system. We'll get to that. If you just look at what it normally does. Here. It's called Spectral Rage. When you cast it, you create this little hall of mirrors here, and it traps enemies. And they get confused, and they start shooting the mirrors, and take damage back. Most people consider this to be Gara's most useless ability. It has use. But for a beginner player, or for someone running with kind of like, you know, don't have all the mods in the world and stuff like that, this ability, you're probably not going to use it very much. You won't see much use for it. But, you know, it does have a use. And finally, her number 4 ability is the Glass Wall. As you can see, with enough range, you can make this glass wall go pretty far. It goes like, I don't know, 20 meters or so in every direction here. You can destroy the glass wall with your number 1 ability. It explodes. It hurts everything standing around you. If you want a smaller glass wall, you can just press the button again as you're casting it, and bam! I chose to stop it. Now I have a smaller glass wall. Neat. If you cast it in the air, it will have more verticality. But as you can see, it might not be able to fall all the way down if you stop it too fast. So you gotta be like, boom. And you can build a kind of cool wall, right? And you can cover a pretty large area with this wall. And you'll see in normal missions that enemies, they will not be able to get through this. If you just do normal star chart missions. It's gonna stay up for almost goddamn forever. Now, do your team a solid. The color of this glass wall is dependent on the energy colors you set. You can be quite annoying to your team if you set very bright, very flashy colors. You will basically create a wall that you just can't even see through. So choose dark colors, choose matte colors, choose something that's not so garish, if you will. And your team will thank you for it. So those are the basics. Those are the basics of what Gara does. Now, we will get to what Gara can actually do. And this all revolves around her number 2 ability. This one. Because this ability, you see that little number there in the bottom that does 387 damage? Oh, we can make that number go up. We can make that number go up into the millions. Which means that anything that she gets close to will start taking millions of damage. And that's how you do it, people. So how do you do it? Well, here is how it works. The easy version. You know how her glass wall, how you can, you know, cast your number 1 on it to make it explode outward. Like that. And it hurts everything around. And it doesn't hurt it just a little bit, it hurts it a lot. Here, I'll show you just how much her number 4 hurts. Right? I create a glass wall. I detonate it. They die. So, the glass wall absolutely hurts. Because you shoot out a bunch of glass in all directions. So what happens? If you have your glass shard storm here active, and if you cast your glass wall like this, and if you stand outside of your glass wall and use your number 1 ability to destroy it, it explodes onto you, and all of that damage is added to your Shatterstorm, your glass shard storm around you here. So if you look at that little number there in the bottom right, you'll see that it no longer says 300 damage. It says 21,000 damage. Whoa. That's a lot of damage. Now, I'll explain later why the damage is so high. We'll get to that. Because if you just run with... It has to do with your melee weapon. If you just pick any melee weapon at all and you haven't invested anything in it and anything like that, and now we try to do this, the number won't rise quite as fast. So you got your glass wall. You activate your number 2. You pop it. As you can see, it went from 300 damage to 4,000. So, you know, it's still big, but it's not as big as it just was. I'll explain why in a second. So, I'm gonna show you, just in practice, the difference here. I activate it. I cast my glass wall. I shatter it on the outside. Boom. 21,000 damage. Now I walk close to these enemies. And they die. They die as soon as I approach them. So, the way of understanding how to scale this is to understand how this damage calculation works. It's the damage that gets added to your Splinter Storm is dependent on the damage you do with your number 1 ability. And the damage you do with your number 1 ability is directly linked to your melee weapon. More specifically, the mods on your melee weapon. And that is why Gara is one of the Warframes that requires something called a stat stick. What a stat stick is a weapon that you don't use to kill enemies. You don't use it to swing around and hack and slash. You use it because it synergizes with one of her abilities. So you put a specific amount, certain set of mods in this to make one of her abilities do more damage. That's it. So if you look at this sword and how this is built, this is very different from how you normally build a melee weapon. Nothing with like critical hit chance or critical hit damage, nothing with status chance, nothing like that, no condition overload or any of those things, because that's not how it works. All you do is more melee damage, more melee damage, more melee damage. Oh, I don't need... Berserker is wrong. I'm not supposed to have Berserker on here. That's wrong. I should swap that out. And here is just elemental damage, elemental damage, elemental damage, elemental damage. That's it. That's what you want. And this adds to her number 1 ability. What doesn't get added is crit chance and status chance. Her number 1 ability has 0% crit chance, 0% status chance. So even if you were to add something like Blood Rush that gives you like plus 600% crit chance, well, what is 600% of 0? Well, it's still 0, people. You can't increase the crit chance and status chance of it, so don't even try. You just want damage, damage, damage. And for that reason, when you're looking at stat sticks, one of the most important things to look at is this, the Riven disposition. That is how effective a Riven mod is going to be if you add it to the weapon. So what you want is, I'll explain why in a second, but what you want is a weapon that does primarily slash damage. And for that reason, this is the one. Buzzkill, that's what we want here. Increase slash damage here. Yeah, more slash damage. You want a weapon that does primarily slash damage. You want it to have a really high Riven disposition. And that's about it. So unfortunately, that means like the new Volnus Prime, which is her signature heavy weapon, is actually really bad for her right now. Because it has super low Riven disposition, and it's like, it's got both puncture and slash, and you know, that's kind of good for number 1 ability, but it's not focused enough. If you really want this build to shine, you want a proper stat stick. The most common one that people use is the jaw sword, because you don't necessarily need to have a riven for this one, because this one also has a mod you get from the Arbiter of Hexes that just increases melee damage anyway, so you can just boost melee damage even more. So that's neat. But if you do have a melee weapon, like I have with the plasma sword, if you do have a melee weapon that has really high slash damage, that has really high riven disposition, that you happen to have a riven mod that is, you know, what you want, which is just, you know, melee damage, elemental damage, and that's it. If you have that, then that's, you know, better than the jaw sword. And there is also one more weapon we're going to cover for another reason, and that is the Ack and Brunt, Tile-Regor's sword and shield, which I have a nice little skin on. This one also, it does a lot of slash damage. It has a really high riven disposition, and it is a shield and sword combo, which is actually quite important for Gara. It is another way of building her, because you can gain combo by blocking. So, now, why that's important is because the damage from her number 1 ability, which we want to get as high as possible, it stacks with your melee mods, it stacks with your ability strength, and it stacks with your combo counter. So if you have a decent amount of ability strength, if you have a good stat stick, and if you are at maximum combo, these numbers are going to go up even higher. So, let's do this. Let us pop up some big heavy hitters, some corrupted heavy gunners. And I'm just gonna fast forward while I build up to 12 combo, the maximum, and then I'll show you the difference. And we're at 12 combo. So now, if I activate my number 2, I activate my number 4, and I slash it, boom! I immediately went up to 87,000 damage with one pop. Do it again, boom! 175,000 damage. So without a stat stick, without 12 combo, I went from 300 to 4,000. With all of the things I've done, I went from 300 to 80,000 with just one cast. So now, I get up to like 400,000 damage per like tick that I hit enemies with. However, there is one more thing that you need to keep in mind, and that is that this ability has a duration. And this is where it takes finesse and where it takes skill to run this build. Because you can see in the bottom right here, I'm about to run out. And when I run out and this ability expires, I lose all of my stored damage. And while this ability is active, I can't recast it on myself. So how do I maintain it? It is because whenever you cast her number 4 ability, you reset the duration of her number 2 ability. So as you can see down here in the bottom, we're now at like 15 seconds. So if I recast the glass wall, boom, goes back up to 28 seconds. And this is really important because you can't ever let it expire, because if you let it expire, that means you have to start from 0 again with your built up damage. And you can't let your combo meter run down either, because if you do, then you won't be able to build up damage as fast again. But here comes a problem, right? How do I build my combo if enemies die as soon as I get close to them? How can I hit them with my sword? And that is where we come to the Awoken Brunt, which is a sword and shield combo. If you want to build Gara the real stylish way, you use this. And the reason for that is because of Guardian Derision. It has a mod that lets you build combo simply by blocking enemies. So if we unpause the AI and pull out this, as you can see there in the bottom, like I am building combo just by standing around, which is great. With the Awoken Brunt, I can always maintain my 12x combo without even having to swing my weapon, which is absolutely fantastic. Which means I can start building my damage. And I'm always at 12 combo. And as soon as the durability starts running down, all I gotta do is recast my glass wall, jump outside it, and destroy it. And like pretty soon we're gonna get those big damage numbers to where enemies start dying just by me standing close to them. Which is what we want. You can make it even better. If you cast glass wall and enemies stand inside it, enemies are gonna become crystallized. Crystallized enemies become vulnerable to damage. They take more damage. So that's basically it. Once you start rolling with this, you don't even need to click buttons. You don't even need to fire off your guns or shoot your melee. You just make sure that you don't run out of your number 2. That's it. Now, for this to work, you need to maintain energy, because you can't run out of energy. If you are running with Gara's normal kit, with Spectral Rage, she has a augment called Spectral Siphon, which actually makes this quite an important ability for Gara, because that means you can make sure that enemies just drop energy orbs left and right, which is really good. That way you can make sure you always have energy, which he needs. I have done it a different way with the helmet system. I have replaced her ability number 3 with Banshee's Spellbind, because Banshee's Spellbind is a very nice little ability. It crowd controls enemies. It makes them drop their guns. So when they wake up, they have to go and pick up their guns again. It also has an augment, which means if you hit a bunch of enemies with it, you get energy back. So that's great. And if you cast the ability on yourself by holding the ability button, you become immune to status effects for the entire duration of the ability. You can see these little butterflies around you while it's active, and I can't be affected by status effects. I can't get knocked down. I can't get affected by toxin proc, stuff like that. Which is very good, because this is something that Gara otherwise can't do. So, if you look at Gara's weaknesses and what she can do and what she can't do, it's basically 3 things that she needs. She needs energy generation, she needs to be able to clear herself of status effects, and she needs some way of stripping enemy armor, which she doesn't have. Spellbind doesn't solve the armor problem, but it does solve the status effect, and it does solve the energy. Another opportunity for, increasing her strength with the helmet system is to infuse her with Hildren's Pillage instead, because that does let her strip armor, and that also lets her remove negative status effects. However, it does not help her with the energy gain. So it kind of depends on if you want to be more offensive, or if you want to take more of a support role, or play a bit slower, or whatnot. Both work very well. If you are going to infuse something in Gara, I'm going to say should be either Spellbind or Pillage, depending on just your preferences. Now, her primary weapon, if you play Gara this way, that I just described, you're never gonna fire your primary weapon. You're just killing enemies with your abilities. For that reason, I am running with a Miter, because the Miter has a mod that lets you pop nullifier bubbles, and that's actually really important, because nullifiers can come and ruin your day. If you end up in a nullifier bubble, you lose all of your stored damage, and you have to start from 0 again. And nullifiers walk right through the glass walls. So with this mod, you can just run a Miter. Whenever you see a nullifier, you just pop the bubble, it's permanently popped. And then you don't have to worry about it. Now, let's look at the build for Gara herself. You don't really need to have more than 140% ability strength. That is enough to give you 90% damage reduction from the number 2 ability. If you can squeeze out a little bit more though, which I did by using an Umbral Intensify, that's nice because it does help you build damage a bit faster with her 1, 2, and 4 together. But you don't really need all that much. Range is really important. It determines how far enemies can be away from you, but while still taking damage from her Splinter Storm. So that's actually super important. Don't need all that much efficiency because we are running Primed Flow, giving us a really big energy pool. We are running Arcane Energize, and we are running Spellbind. That is enough to generate enough energy to keep us going forever, so we don't need more efficiency. Duration, I'm running it a bit tight here at only 133%. It means I need to refresh my Splinter Storm pretty often. It only lasts for about half a minute unless I cast a new glass wall. But then again, every time I cast a new glass wall, I increase the damage of the number 2 ability, so I kind of want to be casting this all the time anyway, and I feel that about 30 seconds is enough. If I've gone 30 seconds without casting Mass Vitrify, I'm probably not playing her the right way. So, duration is pretty good where it's at as well. I like using Corrosive Protection because, like I said, she doesn't have a good way of reducing enemy armor. This helps a little bit with that. And that's just, that's the build. You can tweak it if you want to. If you don't want to stress about running out of the Splinter Storm, you can choose to increase the duration and have more duration that I'm currently having. You can ditch some of the range or something like that if you just want more duration. That's fine. That's fine. You can do that. That's not wrong. It's just a matter of preference, basically. Secondary weapon, completely irrelevant. Doesn't matter what you do. I like running Naramon because it has the power spike, passive, which means that you don't have to worry about running out of your melee combo counter to the same extent. But yeah, ideally, you want the Akenbrunt with a really good Riven mod. I do not have a Riven mod for the Akenbrunt. So I just build it like this. Just a bunch of damage, a bunch of elemental damage, a bunch of slash damage, and Guardian Derision to make sure I'm always at 12 combo. Super easy. So yeah, that's the build. If you just go through the normal star chart and just use her as without even thinking about it, all you do is you keep your number 2 active to have 90% damage reduction. You use her number 4 ability to defend objectives and stuff. And when a bunch of enemies are gathered outside of it, you just pop it and everything dies. And that's how you play Gara. But if you want to take her for a spin in really, really late game, high-end endgame content, then you use this method. You make sure that your stat is immune. You cast the Splinter Storm. You have a shield. They're not gonna hurt you. All you gotta do is just stand around. Stand around and chill. And eventually you're gonna be at 12 combo. Don't even have to swing the weapon. Whenever you want to, you start loading up your glass wall. and tearing it down to start building damage. You can cast the glass wall when you're close to enemies, so that they become crystallized. That makes them more vulnerable to damage. You keep on using Spellbind to make yourself status immune. And pretty soon, enemies are just gonna start dying from standing close to you. That's it. Easiest thing in the world. Don't even have to think about it. All you gotta do is just make sure that you do not run out. You do not run out. Clonk. Of your Splinter Sword. Make sure it's always active. And they can't hurt you. They can't hurt you. Not when you got your trusty shield. Now I have noticed something weird here. And this might be just some sort of bug or whatever. But currently when enemies are lifted and floating from the Spellbind, they don't seem to be taking damage from her number 2 ability. It's very weird. Anywho. That's the build, people. That's Endgame Gara. That's how you play Gara in the Endgame. So yeah, I hope you learned something from this little guide. I hope you learned to appreciate and understand this kind of complex Warframe in a more in a better way, so that you can see what you can actually do with her. She can pretty much do everything. So yeah, go farm for Gara Prime. Go get her. Invest in her. Because even for a low level or intermediate player, she's very strong. She can carry you through most basically anything. And once you get to the really high-end endgame stuff, you can turn her into an absolute monster. You can turn her into a killer. Which is cool. So yeah, that's the guide, people. Hope you had fun listening to me. And I will see you again tomorrow for something completely different.